Thank you for coming, everybody. Today is February 10th, 2021. The year's flying by already. But welcome to this edition of Coffee and Containers. This is a regular series designed to discuss various aspects of platform engineering, infrastructure as code, containers, Kubernetes, and microservice and more, with really the goal of building a tight community of professionals motivated to collaborate, share ideas, best practices, all really in the time that it takes to drink a cup of coffee or two, maybe two today. So if you see me disappear, I'm just refilling my cup of coffee. If you enjoy this content, I do encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll be updating that on a weekly basis with lots of new content. And for everyone who's attending us live today, I'll put the link to the YouTube channel into the chat for you after I'm done talking here. My name is Jim Shilts. I'm the founder and president of North American DevOps Group, and I'm also a developer advocate at Shipa. And I'm going to be moderating our discussion today. We've got a great panel discussion lined up with three really great thought leaders. First, we have Bruno Andrade, who's the founder and CEO of Shipa. We have Gautham Pallapa, who is the global CTO at VMware Tanzu. And we also have Jason McGee, who's an IBM fellow and VP and CTO at IBM Cloud Platform. The topic today for today's discussion is application development in the modern world and how to keep our developers happy deploying to Kubernetes. I'd like to jump straight into this discussion. So what we're going to do is, after I ask the first prompt to our panel, I'm going to ask each panelist just to introduce themselves as they reply. I'd also like to encourage all of you who are watching, if you have any questions, drop them into the Q&A feature, drop them into the chat to the panelists, and we'll try to answer them in line, or we'll leave some time at the end for some more answers and questions. So let's go to our first prompt here. So the first question I want to ask our group here is really, as we're rolling into 2021, what do you see as the current state of cloud native and microservices? Or what would you say is a key challenge the teams are really trying to overcome in the next 12 months? And Jason, maybe we can start with you. And again, if you would please just briefly introduce yourself as you respond.
Sure, thanks, Jim. So as Jim said, I'm Jason McGee. I'm the CTO for Cloud Platform at IBM. So I kind of am responsible for all of our public cloud, cloud native technologies, our container and Kubernetes platform, serverless, observability tools, DevOps tools, and the like. So squarely spend my life in the cloud native space. As I look at 2021 and kind of where are we with cloud native and microservice adoption, there's a few things that come to my mind. One is, I think we are kind of in a scale and industrialization phase for a lot of companies. We've done the first projects. Many organizations have containerized environments. They're running Kubernetes. They're doing cloud native things. Maybe they did that in small pockets or with kind of leading edge teams. And what they're really trying to figure out now is, how do we do this at scale across the organization? How do we get all of the projects moved over? How do we deal with the complexities of existing applications? How do we deal with maybe hybrid architectures where I need some things in public clouds and some things on premise? We're trying to figure out how to do regulation and compliance and move sensitive workloads. It's really about taking the ideas that this community of people has been talking about for the last few years and drive it into mainstream adoption. And I think with that comes some interesting challenges, right? I think there's a skills challenge for a lot of organizations where they don't have enough people who really understand the technology. I think later we'll talk about the diversity of technology in this space. It's pretty overwhelming for many people. And so, how do you build skills? I also think that there's an interesting set of activities going on around how developers interact. My personal history, I've spent most of my career in the kind of app platform space. I originally was an app server person at IBM. I built WebSphere for IBM. And so I've been thinking about app development platforms for a long time. And one of the things I think is really unique right now is that with Kubernetes, the entire industry has basically agreed on a common platform. I don't know that that's ever happened, right? Even back in the app server days, we at least had Java and .NET. We had two platforms. But pretty much literally everyone has agreed, both in the vendor community and in the customer base, that Kubernetes is the platform to go forward on, partly because I think Kubernetes is so flexible. But if you then look at it from a developer perspective, that flexibility comes with complexity and a lot of concepts and a lot of knobs to turn and a lot of ways to solve problems. And so I think the challenge now is like, how does the average developer consume the cloud native platform? Are there abstractions, like some of the stuff we're doing in Knative, for example, as a project to like build abstractions, like how do we connect it to the DevOps process in the right ways so that, you know, it's easier to consume. So Jim, that's what I see is like, I think we're in this scale industrialized phase, and I think we have to really think about it that way and think about how the broad mass of the development community can be successful.
Great, thank you, Jason. Gautham, same question to you. And again, if you would just do a quick intro of yourself before you respond.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm Gautham Pallapa. I'm a global CTO at VMware. I focus on app modernization, platform rationalization, business transformation. Put any kind of buzzword that you'd like here, but basically my goal is to try to help improve developer productivity, developer experience while maintaining that operational efficiency. And that's kind of what we do at VMware Tanzu. What Jason said really does resonate. I mean, there's a lot of great points and a lot of good patterns that are coming out, emerging over the last few years. Gartner did a survey, for example, and set out a report in its 2021 planning guide, where they said that we've been in this playground of microservices, containers, Kubernetes, DevOps, CI/CD pipelines. You put your favorite buzzword there. It's about time right now for us to graduate these technologies and practices and move them forward and industrialize them, as Jason said, with a focus on optimization, having a more pragmatic approach and control to help your organization leverage these modern tools and techniques and practices to deliver the business value. And entire last year, a lot of organizations, especially in various industry verticals, have been hit hard by this pandemic, right? Overnight, they've had to transform and shift their entire business model and the way of operation. The customer behavior has shifted from a physical to a digital level. A contactless customer experience. The patience of the customer is extremely low. So what these organizations have realized is that they need to change their business and operating models. And they've actually acknowledged that cloud native technology and modern software processes and practices are the way to accelerate this transformation. So in 2019, I believe there were like 35% of organizations that were running some form of containerized apps in production. And this survey was conducted probably in a very loose way. So when you say containerized application, it could be a small web application running, maybe a Hello World app, maybe the dev were playing around. But what I see is in 2021, there's going to be a tremendous push, not just of having revenue generating applications, but also making them scalable and resilient, running on hybrid cloud strategies for at least 55% of these organizations that have been extremely hard hit because of the pandemic. So as they're looking to modernize their app portfolio, what I envision are three key challenges. The first one is how can we reduce the friction in your value stream through a secure software supply chain to deliver that business value, that the features that the customers are looking for in a quicker manner. So that's number one. The second one that I see is how can I make these apps be more scalable and resilient in a cloud native world and have that application mobility in a hybrid cloud situation while having the visibility into the health and state of my app instances. That is the second huge challenge that I envision. And the third one, and Jason also alluded to this, is how can I reduce the total cost of operation for my app portfolio and digital footprint? And it's not just reducing the TCO, but also how do I not incur that tremendous increase in skill set cost when I'm adopting to these technologies? So those are the three challenges that I envision, especially for 2021 as we accelerate.
Cool, thank you, Gautham. I don't know that I heard anybody call Kubernetes a playground, but not so fun for a lot of people.
It's that's a dangerous playground. There's a lot of
yeah. Bruno, how about you? What do you see for 2021?
Yeah, so I'm Bruno. I'm one of the other founding members here at Shipa. I say that I used to say on my previous startup when we used to have offices, I used to hold the Costco card just to make sure everybody was happy. So today there's no more office. So at least that's off my shoulders. And as a background, I spent a good chunk of my experience as a sysadmin before we all had the nice and fancy names of SREs and DevOps and all that stuff. The time when we used to do everything to make sure your app was running. And when talking to a bunch of organizations out there, it's interesting because we hear a lot of things about Kubernetes, right? People talk Kubernetes here, Kubernetes there. There is KubeCon with thousands and thousands of people, and you see those, I would say, cloud-forward companies, maybe such as Apple or Netflix, really driving kind of really hyperscale or really high scale of Kubernetes adoption out there. But when you talk to the enterprise itself, they are not there yet. They are talking about delivering their first few sets of applications. There are a handful of applications, and now they're looking at scaling. And just by delivering the first handful of apps or services, they realize it's not as easy as explained, right, or expected before. So I think what is forward for us to 2021 and what we need to see more is we need to see Kubernetes being operationalized, right? We come from a world where we had the defined roles and responsibilities across each of the organizations, but now Kubernetes basically blurs the line between every role. So nobody knows what the DevOps folks are supposed to do, what the platform engineering team is supposed to do, the developer is supposed to do, and basically enforcing controls, guardrails across everything and enabling the developer to focus on what they have to do. This is all gone. So I think now what I expect to see in 2021 is a lot more kind of towards initiatives towards operationalization of Kubernetes and definitions of workflow. And that will allow the DevOps team to focus on what they have to focus, the platform team to focus on what they have to focus on, providing that as a service, and allowing the developer basically to focus on the application again. It's funny that Jason mentioned WebSphere, and I spent a good chunk of my time working on WebSphere. I was WebSphere application server certified back on version 4 and 5 and I think 6. I don't even know what version they are on today. Maybe 10 or 11 at this point. I have no clue. And it's funny because I see a lot of parallels between WebSphere application server and kind of and Kubernetes on the way you operationalize things. Before we had the sysadmin guys, right? We're sitting there and waiting for the developers to send us the kind of the jar file or the ear file, war file, and we will deploy and basically go back to the developer with the error or whatever happened. So there's a lot of things that are in common, and I think now it's time for us to start putting kind of the enterprise hat and start operationalizing Kubernetes in a way that developers can consume and DevOps folks can actually focus on that governance and controls. I think that's what I expect for 2021.
You bring up a good point, Bruno. You're talking about workflow, right? I mean, Kubernetes is a great and powerful tool, but if you shouldn't let the tool define what your rules are, right? It should be the other way around. What is your workflow, and how do you leverage this particular tool to make it faster and more efficient?
You know, Jim, one of the things I think is interesting in that is that I think I think we're all trying to make a flip here. Like, I feel like most of the history of IT and computing has been kind of a bottoms up, like infrastructure-led approach. You know, we build servers and we build operating systems and we build app servers, and like, I'm a developer and I want to build an app, and like the first 12 steps have nothing to do with building my app. They have to do with building the environment, and then I build my app. And I think with Kube in particular, we're trying to flip that. And I don't think we're done at all, but I think we're trying to flip that to a model where I can build my app and declare the things my app needs and have the infrastructure adapt down to my requirements. And that's where, Bruno, to your point, I think like this, how do we operationalize it? How do we define policies in a way that like apps can still be self-service and they can still consume the platform, but we can get some commonality. And there's definitely a lot of parallels to app servers. I mean, no new ideas in computing, I guess. We just keep redoing them in new ways. But it's really interesting. I think it's a really interesting switch we're in the middle of.
Yeah. Sorry, were you going to say something, Bruno?
No, go ahead.
Okay, no, I mean, I also think that over the last few years, what has happened is not just that shift from going bottom-up approach across a layer cake and upwards. it's more of the shift, and I want to say the technical maturity and the business savviness of the entire organization. They started to align business and IT closer together and drive towards what they actually want to achieve, what is valuable, what is the business outcome that they're trying to accomplish, and then focus on high value activities. Like, should the developers actually be spending so much of time trying to build the environment? Why can we not reduce that manual toil and have the developers actually focus on what's important to them and what we're, asking them to do, which is actually create these wonderful features that bring customer delight to us, while at the same time we're trying to abstract that complexity. And that's one of the bigger that's another shift that we have seen over the last few years, and I think Kubernetes is helping with that. Having that Kubernetes dial tone within the organization is going to lay that foundation, and you're only building upon it and focusing on things that are important.
Mhm.
I have a couple of questions that are in line with this topic here. So let me ask the first one that's in the Q&A. From discussion, it sounds like Kubernetes is becoming the de facto platform for applications. Does the panel conceive any applications which may not be suitable for Kubernetes and may become legacy apps? VMware and IBM conceivably may have a few of these remaining in the marketplace. I guess just because you guys have been around longer than Shipa has.
We have more legacy for sure. I mean, I can give you my perspective on that. On one hand, has it ever happened that a new technology takes over all of the workloads? It's never happened, right? So there will absolutely be diversity, and there'll be some workloads that don't make sense to move or aren't cost effective to move. Like, there's just no motivating reason to move. There are absolutely specialized platforms. I mean, like at IBM, we have transaction processing systems that run airlines and banks that are, 50 years old. And they're not 50 years old because nobody ever thought to replace them. They're 50 years old because there's nothing to replace them with that actually does the things as well. So there's always a room for specialization. But I also think that like the vast majority of workloads can run in these containerized platforms that we're talking about. And at IBM, we're running stateless apps, we're running databases, we're running data warehouses, we're running AI machine learning workloads. Like, we're running large scale data processing, stateful things. We're running high scale stateless things, all on Kube. We run our whole cloud on Kubernetes. And my experience over the last few years is that, like, generally speaking, as a platform, it adapts well to all those workloads. And so I think for a lot of stuff, yeah, you could move it if it made sense for you to move it.
Yeah, from a VMware perspective, our North Star has always been any app on any device on any cloud. So which means that we're trying to find the most optimal way to run your application on a device or a footprint. Again, Kubernetes is not going to be the solution for every single app. Like Jason mentioned, there are very specific applications that probably need to run on bare metal, right? Especially at the edge or in telcos, because you have certain limitations, or you want much more faster processing power, or you don't want to have abstraction come in the way of processing. So you probably need to evaluate and look at those. There are also some applications which are extremely legacy and which probably don't want to move away from where they currently are. Maybe it's too costly to move them, or it doesn't make a lot of sense. The amount of lift that you get with having Kubernetes and trying to containerize them is probably not going to break even for you. And you might want to retain them or have them in the current state that they are, while at the same time trying to decompose that monolith and try to expose the services or the capabilities in much more of a cloud native way, and those are things that you can containerize and put it in Kubernetes. So we are in the same boat. We do a thorough portfolio analysis and app analysis to do cloud suitability of your particular application. We assess their structure, their behavior, how they are, their degree of connectivity with various things. How scalable will they be? How resilient do they need? And then depending upon that, we provide recommendations on whether you truly want to go there. But for the most part, if you use the Pareto principle, I mean, 80% of your applications definitely should be able to go into Kubernetes as is, or with slight modifications, provided you followed the good software development practices in the past.
Cool. Thank you, Gautham. And I have one more question here. Maybe Bruno, I can address this one to you before we jump on to the next topic.
Sure.
But how do you think the recent deplatforming of organizations changes the discussion about cloud and hybrid cloud and where organizations might run Kubernetes workloads?
I think it changes completely, but I think I completely agree with Gautham. I think the key thing is Kubernetes, and with Jason's point as well, Kubernetes is not the silver bullet. Kubernetes will not solve all your problems. I think before you even think about where you're going to host your Kubernetes platform, I think you should talk about what my application actually needs to run, right? And maybe what my application needs to run, it is to be sitting on a VM or whatever type of architecture, on a monolith type of architecture. And if you do decide to go microservices because this is what's best for your application, this is how you need to scale, this is how you need to host and address user kind of access and requirements and so on, then I think understanding the microservices and distributed architecture is the first point. Once you define how this actually plays on top of your application, then the discussions of where your applications and your services should be hosted should come along. Because then if you define from that point of view, then you are going to understand how you need to scale your application, what type of external services you need, such as maybe databases, queuing, and others. And then with that information in hand, you can define, is Kubernetes the best platform for my application? And what type of provider and where should I host my Kubernetes, assuming Kubernetes is the best, that is going to give me all the services that my application needs to run. So I think one of the things we see a lot is people overcomplicating, because I want Kubernetes, and then they go to the cloud native chart, they get like 1,000 components from there, and they're like, I'm going to install 1,000 components so I can do everything. And then later they end up with that massive thing that they don't know how to support, and their application can't run because that was not purpose on their application, but just because it was a cool technology. So I think if you switch the approach and think about the application requirements first and then infrastructure later, it's much better. I think application has to be a first-class citizen in the planning these days.
Yeah, very, very true. We're starting to get some questions regarding tools, which actually lines up perfectly with our next topic here. So I want to talk about the diversity of tools that are available. And I want to share something with everyone. If you haven't seen this recently, if you go into CNCF and look at the landscape slide that they have. So these are all the tools that play into this space, right? So my question for the group is, when we're looking at this, I mean, this is pretty intimidating. I mean, there's literally, I can't even count all these. There's hundreds of solutions here to consider. So how do you even begin to objectively consider which of these tools to employ? How do we balance between a more flexible or open solutions and maybe an easier to use, but maybe more opinionated types of solutions? At what point does an overarching or opinionated solution become a requirement? In addition, what comes after Kubernetes? Is this going to suffer the same fate as something like OpenStack? I know it's a lot of stuff there, but Gautham, maybe you can start the discussion here on the diversity of tools topic.
Yeah, love to. So if you've seen that CNCF landscape, it's pretty intimidating. We were just talking a little while ago that there's still some white space. So there's a lot of opportunity for more logos to pop in there. I think as of last count, there's more than 1,500 different projects running, and very few of them have actually graduated, right? Or have actually proved themselves. I want to show a slightly different view. And I'm going to share the screen if you guys don't mind. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint, I promise. It's only going to be a few more talk tracks. But basically, we want to focus on what's high value activity. And I've talked about this a little bit before. We want the developers to create ideas, to design, to create those products that are going to bring immense customer delight to people. And we don't want them to focus on any other thing. That we want to abstract the complexity of it. And this is kind of the philosophy, even from the Pivotal days, where we used to have Pivotal Cloud Foundry, we used to have the CF push experience. The goal was to have the developers focus on what they do best, and then abstract that complexity. And at the same time, have the operators focus on what they do best, the day two activities, the stability, the scalability, and the reliability of the platform, but reducing the manual toil. So taking that entire landscape, especially if you're a CTO, a CIO, or someone who's tasked with creating the perfect secure software supply chain for your organization that's going to transform the org and drive your organizational culture through technology, is pretty intimidating as it stands today. But it boils down to a couple of things. The first thing you want to do is you want to have some kind of a modern dev framework, right? You want to provide the flexibility to the developers to have a good framework, any kind of language, a good CI system, data pipelines distributed, relational DBs and all that. You want to provide them and enable them with the tools and databases and services. And as part of that, you want to provide some kind of a Kubernetes dial tone or a framework so that they are building containerized applications. And they don't have to worry about the complexity of all of this, but you want to provide it to them, right? The next thing is integrating that into the CI system so that when the code is checked in, either through a GitOps process or a DevSecOps process, you have it go into some automated container packaging system where it's validated, it's scanned, you already are patching, you know the vulnerabilities, and you can reproduce. So these are idempotent builds that you're having. And then you store them in one of your container registry systems. It's been signed, it's secure, you can reproduce them, they're validated, InfoSec is happy, and they've blessed it, you have the golden image and so on. And we all know that it's not just code that goes through. You have all these third-party applications, COTS applications, databases, and all those other ancillary components that connect to your application. So, okay. So for that, you need to have some kind of a catalog. A lot of companies call it a marketplace, where it's basically a catalog of third-party runtimes, images that have already been validated. They're usually open source images, and they all reside together. And when you're ready to deploy this into your production environment, your CD system kicks in, picks all these bits together, packages them well, and then afterwards, it puts it in an open source aligned Kubernetes framework, right? It's certified, it's conformant with all the releases of Kubernetes, it aligns with the CNCF landscape, and it also, you have capabilities, at least from an operator perspective, you have the ability to have centralized management across multiple clusters because you want to have that policy management, enforcement, governance, and identity management along with backup and restore. From an ops perspective and from an InfoSec perspective, you want to connect and protect these particular applications because for us, stability, scalability, reliability is really important, while at the same time keeping it super secure, right? You also want to have that observability. Right? You want to have visibility across all these applications, the clusters, and these are all based upon open standards. So this is truly what you want to do. And finally, it goes to the customer. So all these are the various steps that go in, and you have so many choices that you can pick from, especially in that CNCF landscape, and that's why it starts fragmenting. It is e to the power of something, it's exponential growth, and that becomes extremely challenging for people. But if you really boil it down, what we at VMware Tanzu do is we focus on how to reduce that friction to go from a concept to the customer. And what we've done is we are curating it in such a way to provide an easy approach to the customer to have any kind of Kubernetes dial tone. It's fine, but you want to focus on the capabilities, not the technology. And I've seen this with a number of organizations where they already have made the decision that they're going to go with a particular technology, and then they try to retrofit it back into what they want to accomplish. And that's where the challenges come. And that's why you have such a plethora of options in CNCF. But when you boil it down, there are very specific things that you want to have in your ecosystem. It's not just Kubernetes, it's everything around it that brings that complexity. So that's where having a curated approach, I don't like to use the word opinionated, I like to use it more as curated. It is very bespoke and selective based upon your organizational culture, your technology footprint that you already have, your legacy application portfolio, and try to find a cohesive way in which they all can connect together. And The goal has to be trying to improve your value stream, reduce the friction, increase automation, and reduce that manual toil in a very secure manner. And that's truly what you have to do when you're picking and choosing from that CNCF model.
Yeah, good point. Bruno, as Gautham here was talking and we were looking back at that slide, I was thinking about lots of the people that we talked to as well. I mean, I think a lot of environments don't look too far off from that landscape, right? Where there's lots and lots of different tools. And so what would you say to somebody who is getting started down this path, and how do you kind of narrow that down to a select set of tools? Because you want to offer best of breed to your dev teams, right? But you want to make it easy to manage or reasonable to manage at an enterprise scale as well.
I think it falls back into the 2 points that we mentioned before, right? One is the knowing what your application actually needs before you start picking components out of the CNCF. And the second point that I would say is the operationalization process, right? I mean, if you don't know how to operate this thing, you're just going to keep throwing, oh, this doesn't work, just throw another CNCF component. 1,000 components later, I'm sure your application still won't be working. But I would say I'll push this a bit even further, right? Because I think what you mentioned as part of the question as well is, how do we kind of make sure that we're choosing the right pieces and we're driving the right kind of process and so on. At least my personal thought is, and I know a lot of folks, they don't like hearing that, is Kubernetes should disappear, right? I know a lot of solutions out there we're talking about, well, this is how you can do with Kubernetes. This is how you can take care of Kubernetes. This is how you can do. Damn, what generates revenue for you? It's not Kubernetes, it's your application. Today, we changed so much and we moved the bar so much that when we're deploying applications, we're not thinking if AWS or IBM Cloud or whatever other cloud is using, maybe VMware as a hypervisor or ESX or Zen. We just don't care. We're deploying our code, we're deploying our application. So we moved up so much, and Kubernetes is very powerful, but I get the feeling that many times this is actually dragging us down back to the infrastructure and making us take a step back, that we're thinking, how do we do with Kubernetes? How do we do this? How do we do that? How do we do this? And we forget about the application. So I think personally that for Kubernetes to not have the same fate of other technologies, that they were so complicated and dragged us so much back into the infrastructure, it should just disappear in a way that we should again focus on the application, just like we do with cloud servers today. We deploy our code, plug it into our CI/CD pipeline, application is delivered, that's it. We're not dealing about how do I deploy for ESX? How do I deploy for Zen and so on? I think that's the goal we should aim for moving forward.
I thought you were going to talk about pizza again, Bruno.
Yeah. I can use my shameless pizza plug, yeah, for sure.
Bruno does a nice analogy around making pizzas and getting pizza delivered for a big party in regards to this exact topic. But I'll put a link. We won't go through all of it here. I'll put a link so you can watch that in a different video. But Jason, Jason, we haven't heard from you yet. What do you say on this topic here?
Yeah, I mean, both of you brought up some really good points. I guess for me, there's 3 or 4 kind of things that come to mind in this space. First is, I look at that picture and what it says to me is like, you have to be a little bit crazy to self-assemble the environment. Like to go through a picture like that and think, I'm gonna pick each of the pieces that I want to use and put them together, especially if you keep in mind that many of those things are open source projects that have their own velocity and they're changing every day or week or month. Like if you actually try to integrate and keep up with the technology, that's, it's definitely possible. It's hard and it requires a lot of skill and a lot of effort. And so I think there's a question embedded in that view, which is like, what's your consumption model, right? Like, how do you want to consume all this stuff? And who do you want to partner with to help you consume it? And I think in my experience today, most people are choosing a platform, like a software platform or a as a service consumption model. They're getting an OpenShift or a Tanzu, they're going to IBM Cloud or Amazon or Azure, and they're consuming these cloud native technologies as a service. And I actually think for most people that's smart because it's a very dynamic space. And I think you need someone helping you kind of bring the pieces together into something, to your point, Bruno, which actually helps you get your job done and build apps. Your job isn't to run Kubernetes. Your job is to actually like build something that makes your business better. And so that's the lesson that I've seen over the last few years, is that like the diversity is awesome. It's just you need somebody to help you put it together. Secondly, I think on the opinionated versus not opinionated, like there's definitely in my mind a role for more opinionated slices through the platform. And we see that in lots of places. Like there's frameworks for doing, machine learning with Kubeflow and TensorFlow. There's frameworks like Knative, which are fundamentally about apps, but at a higher level of abstraction. Like there's lots of those technologies, which are really about, if I can be a little bit more prescriptive about the kind of workload I'm trying to run, I can simplify some of the concepts. And I think we need those, and there's a role for those. And I think, at IBM, we're doing this thing called Code Engine, which is our kind of new serverless cloud runtimes platform that's built on top of Knative. And it's all about like having a workload centric way to consume as a developer. Like I'm building a batch processing application. Like the things I want to create are different than if I was building a API backend. So I think opinionated is good. What I think you have to watch out for with opinionated is like hard boundary lines between the opinion and not following the opinion. And I'll give you an example. Like, many of us also did a lot of work in Cloud Foundry, and IBM and VMware as well are big Cloud Foundry history and have lots of customers on there. I think one of the challenges Cloud Foundry had is like, if you stayed within the opinion, it was awesome. As soon as you strayed from the opinion, you had to give it up entirely and go do something else. And so the thing I like about what's going on with Kube is that a lot of these opinionated frameworks are being built on top of a common platform. So if you don't fit anymore, you can kind of just downgrade one step to the more general platform and keep going. And I think that's an important attribute. The last thing I would say is that diversity, I think, is born out of the fact that cloud native technologies address both development concerns and operations and security concerns. And so like every dimension of IT is there, like how we do monitoring, how we do security, how we do logging, how we build apps, like how we do CI/CD, like they all get touched. Everything changes in some way as you get into this space. And so I think it's a manifestation of like a real transformation that we're driving in IT on how we build software. And then I can't pass up the OpenStack comment. I mean, how can we let go on the OpenStack comment? And I guess my opinion there is like, we're already past OpenStack, where OpenStack ever was, because in my opinion, OpenStack never really crossed over from being a vendor-led technology initiative to a real platform that people were using. I mean, obviously it got deployed in customers and it's still run in customers today in places, but in the large, it never has had the real world production scale that we already see today with Kubernetes. And so I think we're already kind of way past that milestone, if you will.
I would +1 on that OpenStack comment. It's with Kubernetes, and especially when we're trying to drive Kubernetes within the ecosystem, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it ubiquitous. So that means that nobody should ever care about Kubernetes. And the argument should not be one Kubernetes is better than the other Kubernetes. It's just the Kubernetes dial tone is the infrastructure that you need. Nobody really cares about where it's coming from. The thing that we have to focus on is considering your legacy footprint and your technologies that you already have, how much of an appetite do you have to transform? Do you want to completely revolutionize what you currently have, your footprint, and abandon them and go with newer CNC of technologies? Do you want to pick and choose the ones where you want to invest in a very strategic way to create that momentum and start delivering to your customers faster, while at the same time looking at opportunities to reduce your technical debt, reduce your manual toil, and increase your automation footprint? So I think what Kubernetes is, the ecosystem is trying to drive, is that second approach where we're being very pragmatic in the way we are transforming our organizations, and that's one of the most exciting things that I've seen over the last few years.
So let me, I actually have a comment in here that is right in line with this, but it actually kind of bridges the gap into the next and final topic. And I want to stay on time here. So what I want to do is read this comment and then read our next prompt. And then Bruno, I'll have you start with the response here. So the comment that we got in the chat is, With app containers evolving, we now have the option to deploy directly to containers such as JBoss, EAP on Azure or AWS. We can easily build into our DevOps pipeline, and JBoss on the cloud has underlying scalability and orchestration built in. It allows applications to be portable across cloud vendors. So why even mess with Kubernetes or Tanzu when the vendors already have built it in their offerings? Sorry, put that sentence together. So sit on that for just a second, and I want to kind of frame the next prompt for you too. And this again is around staying relevant in this space. So I wanted to ask the three of you, how can we stay relevant as part of an open Kubernetes platform? You're trying to differentiate, right? We looked at the landscape slide. How do we stand out there, and kind of in line with the comment too, right? How do we stand out and stay relevant with all these things evolving in different ways? Are there strategies that you use to keep from becoming one to two steps behind the latest and greatest Kubernetes release in kind of the direction that people are going? And Bruno, I know that was a whole lot. I hope you retained some of that, but we'll start with you there.
Yeah, no, I think starting by the comment that you read is if you have solutions that already offer what you need to deliver your application, then you don't need to fiddle around with Kubernetes or Tanzu. You're done, right? I mean, don't create complexity where complexity is not needed, right? You should look at Kubernetes if none of these platforms are addressing the requirement for your application. And now you need to be more specific about how do you deliver maybe ingress routes and so on. Then you start looking at what Kubernetes will look. But if JBoss on Azure or whatever suffices your requirement, stay there, my friend. Don't even try recreating the wheel if you don't need to. Now, to your second point, how do you stay relevant? And I think that's linked to the last discussion as well. We at Shipa, we chose to be opinionated where we as a team believe opinionated approaches add value, and be non-opinionated where it adds value to you as well. Non-opinionated in a way that we decided to build Shipa as a framework for your application management on top of Kubernetes. Doesn't really matter where you're running, right? Even if you're running on IKS, for example, from IBM is one of the clusters that we connect to. Same thing on connect to OpenShift, connect to OKE from Oracle, GKE from Google, AKS. So if you want to use Istio as your ingress controller, if you want to use traffic as your ingress controller, or Prometheus, for example, we allow you to connect these to Shipa and use the best of breed that you want in the underlying infrastructure based on your corporate requirements or your application requirements, but then start establishing some boundaries as you start moving towards kind of platform operationalization and developer, in a way that you can define every application that gets deployed here gets this set of controls and guardrails, such as this set of security scans, this set of network policies apply, this set of teams in connection to external services. So here you start being a bit more opinionated, but we chose to allow you to change and move the underlying infrastructure as you need, and be non-opinionated there, in a way that Kubernetes comes with 120 now. If you want to swap your clusters, the versions you can underneath Shipa, in a way that it doesn't impact the application layer and your developers and the operationalization boundaries that you created. So that's how we at Shipa, at least, we chose to be chose to drive this strategy. So we're not one or two steps behind, in a way that Kubernetes comes with a new version, a new functionality, but for us to be able to, for our platform or whatever, to get to that point, it's going to take another 6 months to a year. So we have to wait. So we chose to allow you to change the components that you want underneath, but without impacting the operationalization controls that you define for your platform and your developers.
Sorry, I'm mute here. Jason, let's ask you the same question here.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'd say a few things. I mean, as far as staying relevant, I think there's a couple dimensions. One is many of us in this conversation, our teams are active members of the open source communities that are evolving these technologies, right? So like the work at IBM, the work we're doing in Kubernetes, and on the Red Hat side with OpenShift, like the work my team had been doing around Istio, like contributions in Knative, like there's many open source projects embedded in that picture we've been talking about. And so part of staying relevant is actually helping guide the industry and drive those projects forward and take what we're learning from our users who are really building systems on these and building in the roadmap and the evolution of the technologies to make it easier for people to consume. And so today, in today's world, I think part of relevance is influence and contribution over the evolution of shared technologies that we're building together. I think the second way is to go back to my comment about like how you consume. Like in my case, you know, I'm a public cloud provider and I'm a platform provider, a software platform provider, and IBM's relevant in this space because we're the ones for our clients who are going to bring all those pieces together and going to deliver a combined platform and a combined as a service experience that allows people to be effective in building and running applications. And I think there's unique aspects to that. Like one of the things that I'm very focused on in IBM is like, we work a lot with complex enterprise clients. We work a lot in regulated industries like financial services and insurance and government and healthcare. There are unique requirements there around compliance and security, around data protection and sovereignty. And so taking these cloud native technologies, hosting them as a platform or as a service, and doing that in a way that means like a global bank can actually leverage that platform to build a secure and compliant workload quickly, there's a lot of value there. And that's not directly what's happening in the community. That's building on what's happening in the community and operationalizing it. And I think there's a lot of value that we all provide by how we run the technologies on customers' behalf, in addition to just the core technologies themselves. You know, the other thing I guess I would say is to the question, the chat question that you kind of prompted us with as well. I agree with you, Bruno, completely. Like if there is a higher level capability that does what you need, use the higher level capability. Like you should consume as high up the stack as you can for whatever problem it is you're trying to solve. I think in cloud, in public cloud in particular, and as a service, that's easier to do because you're not the one running that. I mean, part of the reason everyone tries to run everything on Kube today, or everyone tried to run everything on an app server 20 years ago, is because if you're the one who has to run that platform, it's advantageous to have less platforms to run and less variation to deal with. And so you try to force everyone into common things. In cloud, there's less need for that because the things you're running on are run by somebody else. And so you can consume higher up the stack. So you have to kind of go back to what's your consumption model. And if you're consuming as a service and you're building a Java app that runs on JBoss or runs on WebSphere and there's an as a service version of that, then yeah, use it, right? At IBM, we happen to be running all that stuff under the covers on Kube 2, which allows us to deliver those higher level capabilities in a software form factor too. So if you need to run it air-gapped in a government setting or in a particular country where a cloud doesn't exist, you can still do that and have a consistent operational model. But that consumption model, I think, really matters. One of the interesting things that's happening in the industry right now is public cloud itself is evolving to enable us to do as a service in more places, right? So like at IBM, I'm leading a piece of work called Satellite, where we can do our public cloud services on-prem or in my competitors' clouds or at the edge. Amazon's doing that with Outpost and Microsoft's doing that with Azure and Google has Anthos. Like there's an evolution of public cloud where that as a service consumption model can live anywhere. And that I think actually helps because it lets you do what Bruno's talking about, which is continue to go up the stack.
Yeah, and I would make one comment too on the comment from the chat that the only time maybe you wouldn't want to operate that high up the stack is maybe if scalability from an enterprise perspective doesn't work, right? If it's not lining up, or two, if the economics don't work, if the licensing is too much money, or if there's a way that you can save money by managing something on your own, then maybe you should consider that.
Sure.
Gautham, let's end this topic on you. What are your thoughts on staying relevant?
Yeah, I want to amplify whatever Bruno and Jason said. I'm 100% in support of everything that they've said. They made some amazing, great choices. I'm probably going to start off with the chat because Jason ended on that, and say that I'm also of the opinion that if it's providing the level of abstraction, the level of flexibility, and the features that you want and the scalability and resilience that you need for your applications already, there is no particular need to retool it or re-architect it just to retrofit Kubernetes into it or make it container ready. I mean, if you're getting the value out of it, just continue doing that as long as it's cloud native enough or it follows at least 5 of the cloud native factors. I think that should be good enough for you. Just make sure that you're not incurring technical debt by your unwillingness to look at this application or assuming that it's already running in a perfectly good way. Because for a lot of organizations, though, especially those who are legacy, who have a lot of these specific applications, be it running on bare metal, or being it in telco, or being it in healthcare, or having a lot of old school computing in the past, it's going to be a challenge for them to maintain the status quo. And they need to start, as they're trying to embrace a hybrid cloud strategy, they need to look at ways in which the services or the capabilities are mobile, not only on-prem, but also in a public environment. And so having that layer of abstraction that can easily move workloads over is something to really consider, because at that point, you don't have to worry about having different branches for different locations or sources that you're trying to load your application on. It's abstracted, and you just have to worry about the features and the services, and then the packaging is done automatically, and Kubernetes will manage everything. What I would then say, in order to stay relevant, there are a couple of things. And this is something that I insist upon with a number of our customers, is having in-depth knowledge of what's running in your digital footprint and where they're running. A lot of people don't have visibility into your app portfolio or your app footprint or their digital footprint. So increasing that visibility, understanding the health, the state of those particular applications, what's running on them, and truly understanding the business value that comes out of it is something really critical. And that's necessary for any organization to be relevant. For us to be relevant, it is to provide that opinionated and curated bespoke approach for you guys, so that it's not all or nothing, like in some of the other models that have been there before, but it's much more aligning closely to the technologies that you have, and trying to identify where you want to reduce your technical debt and switch to a much more cloud native approach. So for example, if you want to bring your own CI/CD toolset, by all means, bring it. We're not going to we want to stay relevant by providing the features and the functionalities that are important to you, and not saying that it's all or nothing, and this is the only way that you have to approach things. The other thing is, as you're going through a hybrid cloud environment, what's really critical is to make sure that you have that overseeing management plane across all your clusters in different environments, be it in any of the public hyperscalers or in on-prem. So having that level of visibility is really important. We're fortunate to have 2 of the 3 founders of Kubernetes at VMware, and they're deeply ingrained in our product roadmap and help us direct where we want to go. Like Jason's teams, we also work on a number of open source projects to stay relevant, be current, try to help shape the future of where Kubernetes can go and the potential that it can bring. But at the end of the day, like how Craig McLuckie says, he says he wants Kubernetes to be boring. He wants it to be like the infrastructure and the dial tone, and he doesn't want people to talk about it. And he says he's personally tired of talking about Kubernetes and why it's important. So I think that's one of the most powerful things that one of the founders of Kubernetes themselves are saying. And that's how we stay relevant. We focus and push ourselves to that higher level of abstraction that we can provide to the customers, and allow them to focus on their high value activities.
Well, thank you, Gautham. I think we could go on these topics for a long time. I know we only have 5 minutes left here. I'm going to wing it a little bit here, you guys. I want to do a lightning round. What I want to do is I had a final question for you guys, but then we've got a few more questions that came in as well. So what I want to do is just do round robin real quick and give each of you about 10 minutes or 2 minutes on the clock. I'm going to ask you one of the questions that came in that I'm also going to ask you after you respond to that. Just give us your tip for 2021, whether somebody's just getting started with Kubernetes or they're already kind of down the path of scaling out throughout the enterprise. Do you have a quick tip that you can give people? So Jason, I'm going to start with you. And the first question I'm going to ask is, how do you manage applications across multiple different instances of Kubernetes, such as on-prem, OpenShift, managed, in public cloud, and so on? And if you could follow that up with your quick tip, then we'll go to Gautham for the next one.
Yeah, that's a very super loaded question because there's a lot of answers. But clearly you need something that gives you visibility across those environments. And so I think of that as two dimensions. One is embedded in all of cloud native and all of this conversation we're having is an assumption that you actually have a good CI/CD pipeline, that you actually have maturity around how you build and deliver code. And that's, I think, the centerpiece of doing that consistently across multiple environments. You have multiple environments and multiple clouds, and you need an input pipeline that lets you target all of those in a consistent way. I think the second thing I would add is you need some tool that gives you an ability to see what's out there and to make changes to it in a scalable way. At IBM, in my IBM Cloud team, we built a technology that we open sourced called Razzie, Razzie.io, that is actually the tool we built to do that at scale. I run like 25,000 plus Kubernetes clusters with a pretty small SRE team. We needed a way to get inventory of everything that's running everywhere, and we needed a way to roll out changes in a logical way across that fleet. I'm not saying most of you are going to go run 25,000 clusters, but the lessons learned there are still valid, which is you need visibility and inventory, and you need tools that help you control configuration and policy across those environments. And I think if you have that mature pipeline and you have the right kind of change control and visibility tools, then you can do Kube in as many environments as you need, right? At whatever scale you need it at. On tips, I'm going to give what's probably a very boring tip, but like I talk to a lot of people, and I think the root of the problem sometimes is we all talk too much. And so my tip to you is like, go pick a project and go do it, right? Like go stop evaluating like the right way to do things and the right tools, and like do something real, pick a real project, get it deployed, figure out like, how to make your team better using those technologies and how your process works. So I just am very practical, like iterate, pick something and iterate, and you will figure out the answers to all these complicated questions about how these technologies influence your team.
I like that. You can't optimize something that doesn't exist, right?
Right. You just start somewhere.
Cool. Thank you, Jason. All right, Gautham, lightning round for you. You got 2 minutes on the clock here. And this actually a Tanzu specific question came in, so I'm going to let you answer this one. The question is, what third-party tools does Tanzu support or not support? Can I use Prometheus or Datadog, for example? And then if you could follow that up with your tip as well.
Yeah, great question. We have a lot of third-party tools that you can integrate with into the Tanzu ecosystem. I do know that Datadog has a firehose nozzle that you can integrate through Taz. Prometheus has a Kubernetes operator that can be deployed through Tanzu application catalog. It used to be called Bitnami before it was acquired by VMware. So pretty much any COTS application or Kube app that was on Bitnami, and there are many, many more that we've added to it, are available for immediate integration into Tanzu. There are a ton of other systems in our ecosystems that can plug in there. So yes, we do have a lot of third-party tools. Tanzu.vmware.com has much more information. Final thoughts. Yeah, so transformation is really important. There are enterprises with existing applications and integration software that takes so many manual steps right now to change, and these are falling behind in this digital disruption age. They're losing customers, they're losing revenue, but at the same time, they're shouldering higher cost, and the risk to operate the software is extremely high because they can't really change it, and that's something that's inexcusable anymore. We need to shift into a much more modern way of not only having a secure software tool chaining in order to deploy applications and migrate them through the organization. So having a wonderful GitOps or a DevSecOps approach is really important. The other thing is trying to evaluate your application portfolio and embracing a cloud, hybrid cloud strategy is really optimal. Your goal is to modernize your app portfolio but not 100%. Everything does not have to get modernized, and everything does not have to get migrated to Kubernetes. So make sure you do that portfolio rationalization before you start embarking. Our goal is to make the Kubernetes dial tone boring and make it ubiquitous within the organization, so you never have to worry about it. I reiterate, I agree to what Jason says. I mean, like, don't suffer from analysis paralysis. Just take the first step. Choose your solution. Choose your curated solution, something that has been battle hardened already by other people, and toolset, and tested on various use cases, and see if it aligns with your industry vertical, with the problems that you're trying to solve for your customer and for your specific organizational culture.
Cool. Thank you, Gautham. All right, Bruno, you're going to take us out in the last 2 minutes here. And a question came in that I was saving just for you because I know you love talking about it. But the question is, what are your thoughts on developer Kubernetes fatigue? And then again, if you could follow that up with your tip for the year.
I think the thing we hear the most is my developers don't like Kubernetes. My developers are allergic to Kubernetes. We've heard all types of things, and that's why I would go back to what I said before. We got to make Kubernetes disappear, right? I would even push beyond the make it be boring, make it disappear. We don't care about the Linux kernel anymore, unless of course very specific use cases. We don't care about the VM that is running, kind of the hypervisor. Again, specific use cases, but like just focus on the application, right? I think that's my take on that. And for I think the tip is, if you decide Kubernetes is the best landing pad for your application, then operationalize this thing, define roles, define responsibilities, and make it work for your apps, right? And then once you have that, then distributing this operational model across the different clusters, different clouds, then this will all come together, right? But if you just keep pushing without having that operational model, it will be a nightmare later. So I would say just focus on that, define the workflow, define the operational model, the roles and responsibilities, and scale that once it works for you.
Well, thank you very much, Bruno. With that, everyone, we're about 2 minutes over time, so we want to go ahead and wrap things up. Before we do, I want to thank all of our panels for being here. Jason, Gautham, Bruno, thank you very much. This was a really, really great discussion. I'm anxious to get this up onto the channel so everybody can check it out as well. We'll include some relevant links in the description of the video as well, so check down there. And with that, it's time for refill. I think I ran out 15 minutes ago, so I've got to go make another cup of coffee here. And we'll see everybody on the next Coffee and Containers. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, folks. Bye.